Hey everybody, Josh Collacchi here with RotoCurve.com, and I'm here to discuss this week on FanDuel. We're going to be talking about Week Nine's cash game picks. Now, as always, cash games are described as 50-50s and head-to-head. So these are the players you like to use in those contests because these players are safer. They have higher floors. They don't necessarily have massive ceilings, but their floors allow you and their prices allow you to reach a good amount of fantasy points to cash in these 50-50s and head-to-heads. Now, these players may not have huge upside, but they have the floors we need to cash in these contests because we're really looking for guys that are not very limited. We're looking for these guys to get maybe 10, 15, 20 FanDuel points, and that's going to reach your cash point for most cash games. Talking right away about quarterbacks. Of course, you've heard me talk a lot about Phillip Rivers this season, and I like him again this week. And what more else do we have to say about this guy in terms of his consistency? He has 2 touchdowns or more in 7 of 8 games. He's scored 21 FanDuel points or more in each of his last 5 games. And this week, he has a good matchup against the Bears team, who has allowed the 7th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks this season. Now, Rivers did lose Keenan Allen to the season, an unfortunate kidney injury, but he does have a lot of weapons at his disposal. He has Antonio Gates still, Stevie Johnson, who's a decent punt play this week, and of course he has Ladarius Green as an emerging option as well. So losing Keenan Allen definitely hurts his value, but I don't think it's enough to kind of diminish his value against a Bears defense that has given up a lot of fantasy points. The other quarterback is a guy that we liked last week, but he really didn't look too good coming back from injury. So we're hoping with an additional week of rest, maybe he's going to be back, and that's Ben Roethlisberger, quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers at 8,300 against the Raiders. As discussed last week or this week, it's not he wasn't appealing to most people last week because he was coming off an injury, but he did have a good matchup. The problem was he didn't reach his value, and he didn't look as fast as he's been. He didn't look like he had as much jump on the ball. But we're looking at this week, he's going to make a return against the Oakland Raiders, who have struggled this season in the secondary. The Raiders have been good against the run, but against the pass, that's where you tend to beat them. Oakland has allowed the 6th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks this season. They've given up 2 touchdowns or more through the air in all but 1 game this season. That 1 game was against the Denver Broncos, who were struggling at that given time through the air, with Peyton Manning struggling with his arm strength. Moving on to running backs, 3 guys I like are listed here: Devontae Freeman, D'Angelo Williams, and Jeremy Langford. Of course, 2 of those guys are backup running backs, but with the injury situations to Matt Forte and Le'Veon Bell, respectively, Williams and Langford are going to take the snaps as the number 1s. But going into it right away, Devontae Freeman is my top option at running back and probably my top option in any position this week at 8,900 against the Niners. He's very expensive, and I can't stress that enough, because if you pick him, you're going to need to find some value plays, whether that be a cheap quarterback, whether that be a cheap running back, to pair with Freeman, or a cheap receiver, which we'll have those in FanDuel as well for the rest of these RotoCurve channel and on the RotoCurve site, so be sure to keep an eye on that. But I do think he's worth playing in your lineups at cash at 8,900. He's the top option for me because he faces a struggling San Francisco defense. Now, it sounds weird to say that in the past couple years, as they've been very good, but with all the retired players, and they really just haven't been playing well along that defensive line, it's led to them allowing the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing running backs this season, or actually 2nd most FanDuel points, if you look at it that way, in terms of half-point PPR, which you can find on RotoCurve.com in terms of fantasy points allowed. So the Niners have given up a lot of FanDuel points per game to opposing running backs. Of course, Freeman is a massive volume guy, so it makes him a top play each and every week. So a guy that's getting a ton of volume and has a good matchup, it makes for a top play for me. The other 2 guys, just real quick, I wanted to discuss were Williams and Langford. Of course, with Le'Veon Bell going down, D'Angelo Williams becomes the bell cow again for the Steelers. In 2 weeks as a starter, D'Angelo Williams rushed 41 times for over 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. He was very productive, and I think we're going to see that again for the rest of the season as he takes over for Bell. And it starts this week against the Raiders, who have actually been good against opposing running backs, as we just discussed. But with D'Angelo Williams' volume being there, he is going to catch some passes out of the backfield. I think his price and volume makes for too much value to pass up. The second guy is Langford at 6,400. He's a little bit cheaper than D'Angelo Williams, but I still think he's a good matchup to pair with Freeman if you want to choose between the two. Langford is going to be the starter if Matt Forte is out, and all signs are pointing to him missing this week's game. It's interesting because after Forte got hurt, Langford played in every single snap. And that means that he's going to play on first and second down. He's definitely going to be a lock for third downs. And that gives him a lot of value because that means he's the pass catching back as well. This week in week 9 against the San Diego Chargers, rather, he has a top-tier matchup because the Chargers have given up the most FanDuel points to opposing running backs. So a guy at 6,400, although he's not as good as his predecessor, I guess I could say, in Matt Forte, I think Langford makes for an excellent target because he is relatively cheap considering the other running backs are in the 8 or even 9,000 if you're looking at Gurley, and he does have a top matchup. And he's going to get a lot of snaps and a lot of touches. Moving on to wide receivers, 3 guys I like. The first one is Antonio Brown, who I like as a nice combination stack with Ben Roethlisberger. I like Brown because he faces the Raiders, who have given up 200 yards or more to opposing wide receivers in 4 of the last 6 games. And we all know about Antonio Brown's consistency when Big Ben is the quarterback. We saw that streak of over 33 games with 5 catches with 50 yards or more. And last week, he caught 6 catches for 47 yards and a touchdown. So it shows that even though that Steelers passing game struggled a little bit with everyone coming back from injury and getting back in sync, he still has a ton of value because he can catch touchdowns. He's going to get a lot of catches. And against an Oakland defense who struggles in the secondary, I expect Brown to be targeted well over 10 times, which definitely makes him a good play in cash games. The next guy is a guy that I think has been flying under the radar a bit too much, and that's Eric Decker. He's quietly been one of the better receivers in fantasy this season because he's caught a touchdown in all but one game. The one game where he didn't catch a touchdown, as you can see, he scored just over, I believe, 14 FanDuel points because he caught 94 yards worth of catches, and in those 6 catches, that brings him right to value. So considering the fact that he didn't catch a touchdown in just that one game, but he did reach value in that game as well, it makes him a really consistent option. This week, he faces the Jaguars, who make for a very good matchup for Decker because the Jaguars have given up 422 yards and 4 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks to opposing receivers. Brandon Marshall is still there. He got banged up a little bit in week 8, so I expect Decker to be a top target again. And if he can continue his touchdown streak or not, he's still worth playing because of all the targets, all the yards, and all the catches he gets in that Jets offense. The third guy is Amari Cooper at 7,300. Last week, we discussed Michael Crabtree as an option because Cooper was going to be covered by Darrelle Revis, and Crabtree ended up paying off. But this week, I think it's a time to take a look at his teammate in Amari Cooper because Cooper is going to be lining up against the Pittsburgh Steelers secondary, who, regardless of is going to be on him, it's given him a good matchup. The Steelers have given up a touchdown catch to opposing receivers in 3 straight games. They've given up a touchdown 4 of 5 games to opposing receivers. And Cooper is definitely the number 1 receiver for that team. So look for Derek Carr to look at him early and often. Expect him to get a lot of targets. And emerging as one of the better young receivers already, just 7 games into his rookie career, he's going to make for an excellent option for years to come as well. There's other guys I wanted to talk about real quick. I'm considering Dez Bryant against Byron Maxwell, and also like Stevie Johnson taking over as the number 1 receiver in San Diego with Keenan Allen out. Moving on to tight ends, the other guy at San Diego who I think is going to be the leading pass catcher for that team is Antonio Gates. With Keenan Allen out, it makes Gates the top receiver and top pass catcher for that offense strictly because of volume. I expect him to see well over 10 targets for the rest of the season in every game that he plays. And although he is recovering from a knee injury, it definitely gives him the upside and the safety to play in cash and GPP games. If you look at the matchup that Gates has against the Chicago Bears, it gives him a little bit of an interesting piece of research because the Bears have been good against the tight end this season, but they really haven't faced anyone that's used them as a feature in their offense. And of course, Gates is a big feature in that San Diego offense, so that matchup really can't tell one way or the other. But considering Antonio Gates had 4 catches for 56 yards in a tough matchup last week against the Ravens, I think he's pretty much matchup proof, especially if he gets his knee back in shape and ready for week 9. If you don't want to go with him, the other tight end I like is Jordan Reed, who has been very consistent so far this season. He has 11 FanDuel points or more in all but one matchup, and that came against the Eagles, who have been excellent against tight ends this season. And in that game, Jordan Reed actually ended up getting hurt, I believe. So he didn't see a full amount of snaps, and that, of course, limited his production. Reed makes a solid cash game play because his upside is relatively limited, although he can touch touchdowns. But his floor has been very high, and that's exactly what we like to talk about in cash games. He faces the Patriots this week, who have given up the 7th most FanDuel points to wide receiver this season. Now, you may be thinking, Reed is a tight end. But if you watch the Redskins play, he lines up at receiver a lot. And considering that New England's given up a lot of fantasy points to opposing receivers, that benefits the tight end and Jordan Reed because of where he lines up. And of course, you can use this information as well as everything else you can find on RotoCurve. All the tools have been updated for this week. Everything's free. So as always, give us a thumbs up. Thanks for watching. And if you give us the thumbs up, we'll be able to be sure to bring you analysis each and every week. And as always, all the tools over there are free on RotoCurve. The analysis is free. So be sure to go over there, sign up, and check it out. Good luck, everybody, and let's make Week 9 on FanDuel a profitable and fun one in NFL DFS. Good luck, everybody.